Y2K is out and, well, it's definitely a movie. It's bad, but it does have some entertaining parts as well, so let's talk about it. Now, if you do want to see what I gave this movie out of 10, head over to my shorts, TikTok, or Instagram and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. And if you've already seen this movie, feel free to let me know your thoughts on it in the comments. But without further ado, let's talk about Y2K. So if you haven't guessed it yet, this movie is obviously about Y2K if it actually were to have happened, where technology tries to take over humans. And we follow both Rachel Zegler and Jaeden Martell's character as they try to figure out a solution. Starting things off with the good, and this is one of the few things I think this movie did a very good job at, and that was just capturing the nostalgia of the 90s. This movie had a lot of love for that time period, and they were not afraid to show it. I mean, if there was one thing this movie wanted you to know, is that it took place during the 90s. Everything from the music, the baggy clothes, the AOL instant messaging. They even had those like devil juggling sticks, which I used to play with all the time as a kid. Now look, I was just 4 years old at the turn of the millennium, but I definitely grew up in the 2000s, and a lot of that stuff was a big part of my childhood still. But for someone who really remembers the 90s and either grew up in the 90s or was a teenager or high schooler in the 90s, I think they're gonna get a real kick out of this movie and just the nostalgia that it has for that time period, because it really transports you back into that world. Next up for the good, and this is probably the most entertaining part of this entire movie, but the way they unalive people in this movie is just so funny to me. I mean, people don't just die in this film, they get taken out in the most hilarious and ridiculous way possible. It just seemed like everyone who was involved with making this movie sat down in a room one day and was like, okay, what are the most outrageous and crazy ways that we can take out humans using machines and electronics, and then proceeded to put those ideas in the movie. And let me tell you, in my opinion, this was the best part of this entire film, because as I said, the way they went about taking some of these people out in this movie was just hilarious. And they did not hold back on the blood and gore at all, because blood was just spewing everywhere when someone died, and you could clearly see that they were using prosthetics. It was one of those movies, and that these were like fake arms and limbs, but it was just blood everywhere. People were going crazy and screaming. It was super over the top, but man, I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't entertained by that. And the way they killed some of these people in this movie is a big reason of why this movie reminded me of Final Destination, just by the way that some of these characters went out. I mean, for one of the deaths, someone literally trips over a dishwasher door, and as they fall, their head lands in a microwave, and it proceeds to cook/electrify their head. This was just one of those movies where the deaths were over the top and just downright ridiculous, but it's also the reason why I didn't completely hate this movie, because watching these people get unalived was pretty entertaining to say the least. Moving on to the so-so, and the only thing I have here is the humor. Now, the humor was just okay. This movie is labeled as a horror comedy, but it doesn't have anything in there that's gonna make you laugh out loud, but there are a couple things in this movie that could make you chuckle a little bit. And when this movie did get those couple of chuckles out of me, it wasn't necessarily because I thought it was funny. It was more because of what I was seeing on screen was just so dumb and outrageous that I just couldn't help but laugh. The humor in this doesn't come from what our characters say, it more comes from what they do. But again, as I said before, the way people die in this thing is the most hilarious part about this entire movie. And finally, getting into the bad, and the first thing I have here is the story. Now, I probably could have guessed this going in, but the story just isn't the best in this movie. It doesn't make much sense at all, and there are a lot of things that happen that just go unexplained throughout this entire thing. But at the end of the day, that's just the type of movie that this film is. I would describe this thing as Final Destination meets This Is the End in the form of a long SNL skit, and if you think about too much what's happening on screen, you're just going to ruin your entire experience with this film, because let's be honest, it is pretty easy to pick this film apart if you really want to. A lot of the time, you are just going to have to turn off your brain and ignore some of the ridiculousness that you are seeing on screen, because it is very clear at the end of the day that this movie doesn't take itself too seriously, and a lot of the times it just feels like a parody movie on the 90s. And finally, for the bad, and I guess minor spoiler alert here if you care about spoilers for this movie, but my biggest problem with this entire film is that it killed off some of its best and funniest characters very early on in this thing. Now, I won't say who, but very early on in this movie, they kill off easily the funniest character in the film, and then they do it again a little bit later with, in my opinion, the most entertaining character of this movie. And after they did this, especially with the funniest character at the beginning of the movie, it just kind of felt like we were dealing with the B team for the rest of this thing outside of Rachel Zegler and Jaeden Martell's character. And I guess the thing that annoys me the most about this is that it seemed like they were building up one of these characters to play a big role in the film and really be the comedic relief throughout this entire movie, but when they killed that character off, I was just kind of like, what the heck? Because I was excited to see that character throughout the movie. And honestly, I think if they would have kept both of these characters alive, the humor would have been a little bit better than it was, because these were two funny characters at the end of the day. All in all, yes, this is a bad movie, but it's also so bad that it's good in a way. You're not gonna get much out of this one other than some ridiculous deaths that are pretty entertaining and a lot of 90s references, but you can skip this one and wait to stream it. Those are my thoughts on Y2K. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.